We are starting to record. And we're there. We're live.
Good morning, good afternoon, evening to a few of you. Welcome to today's community briefing. My name is Gregory Sneed. Today is the 13th of July in the year 2023, and we are glad you are here to join us today. Our guest is Dr. Michèle Turner, and she is with USC, and you'll learn more about her in a few moments. We're glad you're here. We're going to get some great information through the community briefing. We've been doing this now for 3+ years, every Thursday, and we are live. We are recorded on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, so please subscribe to our channel. And let me move this camera over there a little bit. There you go. And so thank you for joining us. A little bit about myself. My name is Gregory Sneed, and company's Lifesaver Financial Services. I help my clients keep more of the money they make and help them feel better about their money, because I believe firmly that when you feel better about your money, you feel better about your life. Now, it's my pleasure to welcome to the virtual stage the queen of our community briefing, Miss Crystal Mitchell.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here. I want to welcome you to the community briefing. I'm Crystal Mitchell, as Greg said, and I am the inspiration and founder of the community briefing, and it was created for the to make sure that our community received the information that they needed to receive during the pandemic, that we met the state leaders and stakeholders in our community so that we had a firsthand information drop so that we could keep our businesses alive during that pandemic. We have since moved on past the pandemic, and we are still going, and we have an amazing team. Mr. Stephen Turner, he's the producer. He goes out and finds us all these incredible guests, which we're always pleased to have. Mr. Gregory Sneed, who does the whole co-hosting with myself, and Miss Robin Billups, and we are happy to have Miss Robin back. Today, guys, I am the co-host of Recycling Black Dollars, and this platform is powered and supported by Recycling Black Dollars and the Black Business Association, the BBA. We are monetarily supported by Wells Fargo Bank, PCR, as well as Los Angeles LBC, LDC, and we want to thank all of our sponsors. And if you guys want to be a sponsor, please feel free, go over to our website and hit that donation button, and we'll have it. Today, we're excited because my BizCamp class for the second cohort, they're all attending today. And so in the chat, can you guys all please say hello to the kids, wish them the best of luck in their competition, and look out for these new future entrepreneurs that are coming our way. We are building the future for America, and it takes one of us to make sure one of them is successful. So I'm looking for mentors for these kids and all our kids in our community, because we want them to be as successful as we are. So this is your platform. Please put your information in the chat and introduce yourself and your business. With that, Ms. Robin, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Guys, again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm always glad to be here. The Billups Group is a consultancy focused on what you don't know about procurement. We do assessments, coaching, and get you to a strategic plan. I love the idea that the earlier you can start off in this entrepreneurial mindset, the easier life, I won't say easier, the better your trajectory is going to be. I want to say too that I've been absent because I'm in a clinical trial at the City of Hope for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's going really well. I'm in my second clinical trial. The mission is to push me into remission, and it's going really well. So that's why I've been absent, but not necessarily not referring people who would be great candidates for our show. And what we ask you to do is help us grow this audience, because information is king. That's the collateral that we have going forward. So help us grow this show and invite others to participate. And for the biz campers, this doesn't have to be your last time dialing in. You're a family member at this point. So take care, and God bless.
Back to me?
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry.
I don't know if Crystal was coming back in. All right.
I'm sorry. Back to you, Greg. And
Okay.
Stephen, you're coming in. You're coming in after. Okay. Back to you, Greg.
All right. So I'm going to refer to you guys as young adults instead of kids, and you are business and entrepreneurs and fabulous people that are in training and doing a wonderful thing. So I applaud you for. Um, it is volunteer, right? They're not drafted into it. They're not mandated. Your parents might have had a little arm twisting, but we're glad you are here. All right. Today, our guest is Dr. Michèle Turner, I guess affectionately known as Shelley, and she has her MBA and also doctorate. She's an accomplished higher education administrator with extensive entrepreneurial, corporate, executive, and academic experience. She remains deeply committed to involvement that advances policies and practices to transform equity and inclusion for individuals, businesses, and communities. She's currently tasked with building and leading the University of Southern California, known as USC, Office of Business Diversity and Economic Opportunity, reporting under the USC Civic Engagement and Economic Partnerships and University Relations. In this role, she's responsible for anchor institutional policy, that's setting policy, strategies, and frameworks across USC's academic and healthcare enterprise focused upon the targeted diversity outreach, utilization, and impact. We said earlier before, or I said earlier, that USC has been and is still the largest private employer here in LA County. All right. Robin, you have something? Okay. All right. You putting up the two like they're the second?
Yes, I'm a SC alum, baby.
Oh, okay. Got you. All right. Got you. You were sticking your hand out like you needed to interject something. So let's see. As founder and business owner in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, Dr. Turner also credibly understands the journey of minority business enterprise relative to growth. She completed her doctorate in global education leadership policy from the USC Rossier School of Education, and it included studies with Hong Kong, China, Qatar, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and she also completed an executive MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management, also a Bachelor's of Science degree from USC Marshall School of Business. And she has also published. She's an author, and she's published a highly praised book called Affirmed, and she'll tell us more about that later. And let's see, she also was with Metropolitan Radiology as a general manager for 26 years, also part of the USC Black Alumni Association, and a senior management consultant with, I call it I've Been Moved, IBM, for 16 years. I have no idea where she grew up. Did you grow up here in LA?
No, in San Francisco.
Okay, so still California, but San Francisco. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the virtual stage Dr. Michèle Turner.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Gregory. And I'm so glad to be here. I mean, there's so many people on this call who are just amazing and dear in my life. And Robin, it's so good to see you. I just can't say enough. So thank you, Gregory and Crystal and Steve, for asking me to come and speak about an easy topic of affirmative action. And you know, I'm teasing you all about that because it's not an easy topic at all. And frankly, you know, what I wanted to do is make sure that as we're speaking about this, that, you know, my little caveat is going to be that I'm speaking about this from my experiences and my philosophies, things like that, not necessarily USC's. As you will see in this complex conversation, there's a good reason why I'm kind of sitting in that space about this conversation. So I know that we've got a whole lot of questions about the decision and where we go from here. And I hope that the information I'm going to share is helpful, and we'll certainly have time for questions at the end. I wanted to share my connection to the conversation in this way. I am a second-generation college grad in STEM. I am a former exec in one of the largest STEM tech global companies. As you heard, again, STEM, 27-year entrepreneur in healthcare. And it's still a business that is absolutely connected to our family and our family progress. So I'm still very much involved with that. I'm a former board president of a local independent school, which was primarily a school for Black students in Los Angeles for about 4 years. I am an active alumnus who has supported Black student achievement and attainment for over 40 years. Before this position, I was the executive director of our Black Alumni Association for 13 years. And in that role, it wasn't about alumni, rah-rah kind of events. We were always focused on how we move forward. So this conversation is a very organic one for me. I have worked with thousands of students and families, not just with enrollment and admissions, but with respect to graduation outcomes. And then, of course, now I'm working at the policy level with regard to diversity, with regard to what that means for economic development. And I've been doing that for USC across our institution for about 3 years, a little bit more.
Dr. Turner?
Yes.
For our young guests, can you define what STEM is, please?
Oh, science, technology, engineering, and math. And sometimes in that conversation, people add arts, so it becomes STEAM. And we're going to actually dive into this as this conversation winds around. So I won't leave you hanging on that. I was asked today to speak about affirmative action in higher education, share with you some insight about admission strategies, not just currently, but where we need to think about those conversations and how they should go. Share some insight in terms of how did we get here and how do we focus forward? And then, of course, some Q&A. So I wanted, and especially for the young people, you know, we throw around the term affirmative action in higher education, but what is it really? So it actually was something that was implemented by President Kennedy in 1961, where through an executive order, he made reference to government contracting and how, for the sake of contracting, government contractors needed to take affirmative action to realize the national goal of non-discrimination. But as application about affirmative action started to take shape, it started to also have deep implications for higher education. And so, especially during that time frame, that window from the 1960s and the 70s, colleges started to develop strategies for what they called affirmative action policies for minority access into these schools. And I think, you know, again, for the younger people, you may not realize, but, you know, Black enrollment, especially in selective universities, didn't start happening until the late 70s, where before access for Black students typically happened through community colleges first, and then a large transfer path into schools like USC, like UCLA, until there was an actual focus on admissions policies to start to actually build diverse classrooms. So that didn't happen until 1976, 1977, and I'm sure some people on this call remember those times. And then, of course, for most of the facts that I'm going to give you, I'm going to cite. So if anyone wanted a copy of this, the citations and references are already built into this. So I'm not going to just give you information because this is what I think. But let's talk about admission strategies. You know, California in particular has been a non-affirmative action state since the 90s. And we'll look at that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But admission strategies in most of the selective universities are what we call holistic strategies, meaning that it's not just because of race, but we look at particular things in an admissions profile. And that's to say that we also look at whether or not you are going to be considered an admissible student first. So relative to any of the institutions that you would be considering, you need to meet an admissible profile first. And then we start looking deeper into your profile in terms of how a cohort, a class cohort, is actually built. And some of those factors, in addition to race, happen to absolutely rest on GPA, but not all GPAs are the primary condition for admission. So just because you have a 4.0, keep in mind that at highly selective institutions, they reject a lot of 4.0. So it's not just that, but we look at how a student will fit into the environment of the institution. And that really kind of is answerable based on what direction you see this university going. Where are they really spending their time to build research from? Where are they really trying to build impact from? We look at a student in terms of how they're going to add to that in a cohort. What leadership is a student bringing? What experiences, and we'll talk about experiences in a minute, what experiences is a student bringing? I like to say, what is their mature view of the world? What is their impact going to be in the world, and how are they presenting that to us? And, you know, especially in the essay, and you hear a lot about that essay in the news right now, the essay has always been the thing, because in a lot of schools these days, you don't have opportunities to go and do personal interviews, especially at selective institutions like where I come from. The application pool is more than 100,000 applicants large. So there's not time for interviews. These essays are your interview. So this is why we actually look at what fit looks like and how you're actually trying to give us that vision through your essay. We also look at things like the school that's being applied to. How impacted is the school or the major? You know, are we oversubscribed in terms of applications? And then that means, of course, that the holistic review starts to get much more nuanced. And then lastly, transfer is usually an option at selective institutions, but that pathway for transfer is going to be different depending on the priority for transfer students at that institution. You can find a pathway at competitive universities like the one I come from that might be about as wide as 24%. Okay, that might be about as wide as 24%, but then, you know, you look at places like Harvard and Stanford, where their transfer pathways are very narrow at about 5%. So there's a wide range in terms of the transfer option, but it is absolutely one that is used to build diverse cohorts. I wanted to also emphasize back to the environment that we have been in since 1996, what California really looks like in terms of building diverse cohorts. And I use the example of UCLA under Prop 209. And the rest of us, even as private institutions, are very sensitive to the aspects of the implications of 209. We may do it differently though. But this Los Angeles Times article points to the fact that since 2009, when when race could not be used as a factor in admissions anymore, admissions absolutely plummeted. And it has been 25 years through other reviews of applications and cohorts to get that number back. But with a legislation or policy limitation like a 209, you can still see from this chart, and the African-American enrollment is the darker blue, that admissions for African-American students is still not where it was prior to 209. And let's talk about 209 a little bit more in a minute. But I also wanted to show you that in selective institutions, because of a holistic approach, these institutions are able to build their Black enrollment. And this is the current picture of what Black enrollment has looked like in the top 25 research institutions as of last year. So a Johns Hopkins University, their total enrollment would be around 1,300. Their total class size for a freshman class would be around 1,300. They admitted 215, giving them a 16%, 16% class size of Black students. That's all done through a holistic review. You see Harvard University highlighted. We'll get to Harvard in a minute, but their class size was about 14% African-American students out of a freshman class of 1,600. You'll also see I've highlighted the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the other university referenced in the June 29th Supreme Court case. Their class size at 4,400 students, they were at 10% Black student enrollment. And the reason that these two are highlighted is just to note that they're both very different kinds of universities. Harvard being a private university, University of Carolina being a public university. But even with holistic enrollment practices coming into effect, this, you see what the numbers are telling you right now. How did we get here? And I'm kind of going fast because of time limitations. I realize that a lot of this is very nuanced, and maybe we'll uncover some specific things in Q&A. But a quick summary of how did we get here, especially in California, is that this affirmative action or race neutrality has been brewing for a long, long time. In terms of policy and legislation, it started in 1974, and the Bakke case that you will hear referenced was interesting because it was not a case brought forward about undergraduate admission. It was brought forward about graduate admission in medical school. And Alan Bakke sort of won that case. He got the Supreme Court to rule in favor of minimizing the fact that he should have had a seat in the medical school class. However, the court decision was also to rule that race could be used as a factor in admissions. And this particular point of being able to use race as a factor in admissions actually created the platform for diverse enrollment in higher ed, because, you know, as I said before, you didn't really start to see Black students come into universities until at any great number, if they weren't playing football, until, you know, the late 70s. You see that this decision coincided with that. The decision was actually in 1978. So 77, 78, 79, this is when you started to see the first real cohorts of Black enrollment, especially in selective universities. However, in 1996, Ward Connerly, a Black man at the time, who was also a former UC regent, made the argument and won support to ban race consideration in public education. That was the Proposition 209 decision. Ward Connerly now has a lot of problems being considered Black, but at the time, he used his platform as a Black man to make the argument and gain the argument for race neutrality in admissions, and that was Prop 209. Interestingly, in 2020, California had the opportunity to defeat Proposition 209 and allow race to be considered as a major factor, especially in enrollment decisions, but that proposition was defeated. Proposition 16 on the 2020 ballot, defeated from a margin of 57% to 43%. And, you know, 2020 was also a really interesting year in many of our lives because those were COVID times. and maybe there's some lessons learned in terms of how that was actually brought to ballot, how awareness was created about the implications of it, but it lost. So that set the stage for interested parties like the Students for Fair Admission, SFFA, who was backed by a lot of money from someone by the name of Edward Blum, a white policy interested white supremacist type of guy to bring the Harvard case forward. Interestingly, Ward Connerly showed back up again in that and spoke on behalf of Howard Blum. But the Harvard case resulted in a June 29th decision where now affirmative action has effectively ended nationwide. We cannot consider overtly race as being any kind of factor in admissions. And as you see, Justice Ketanji Brown, I'm Jackson, I'm sure that many of you have seen other pieces of her dissent, but I'm just adding this last one, a condemnation of our society to never escape the past that explains how and why race matters and who merits admission. So that's the policy piece of how we got here, but I'm going to add another, and that's called student debt and finances. I said before that, the situation that we're in has been brewing a long, long time. Most of the distraction has focused on affirmative action policy, but fundamentally the other half of how we got here is because of student debt and how that weighs, especially in Black families. We can credit our governor and President Reagan for a lot of that. So again, same kind of timeframes back in the 70s when Reagan was governor. He decided to dismantle the master plan for education in California, which was our UC and CSU system, which at that time was free. If you were an in-state student and you made the grades, you could progress through our college systems with no charge or little charge. You might have some housing costs. However, in 1967, he moved legislation through that would start tuition charges for the UC systems, Cal State systems, but especially the UC systems. And these charges started to become barriers, especially for low-income families. So you started now to see that, higher education and certainly in research institutions, that there were now barriers being built in terms of access, not just policy, but financial barriers. I have a little note. One of my favorite things about Governor Reagan at the time, of course, was the Angela Davis controversy in 1969. But in addition to creating the UCs now as a fee system, he also wanted to move out Black studies at that time. And this was also the nucleus of when Angela Davis, started becoming, supported in the we won't call them civil rights movements, but we will call them the Black Power movements. But at the nexus of it was the issue about education and free speech. However, back to Governor Reagan, tuition was very high in the UC systems. There were not scholarships at that time. And when he became president, he used this same philosophy to move or dismantle federal grants that also used to subsidize student tuition. And that's when you started to see what we now know as student loans, which have taken the place of federal grants. So as a result of that, Black households do carry a higher net price for college than white households due to income disparities and due to generational wealth. And depending on the institution, those disparities might be anywhere from 24% to 50%, over 50%, compared to 14% to 30% for white families, depending on the institution. So a lot of people forget that, this conversation hinges on finances as well. I wanted to share in terms of how did we get here, where we are, again, some information from research because most people do not agree with the affirmative action as being good policy. And what this chart basically shows you is that you can see along racial lines, especially, that there's some interesting ways that this plays out. Of course, you would expect that Black respondents would approve that affirmative action should be used in considering college admissions in selective universities. But I think what's also very interesting is how it starts to play out from there. Our Hispanic respondents were basically evenly divided on it being a bad thing versus being a good thing. Our Asian respondents disproved that affirmative action was a good thing in universities. And of course, it seems to also play out along political parties. And, this whole conversation now, of course, has become highly politicized, but there are some racial leanings that, as we disaggregate this data, that we're also starting to better understand in this conversation.
Dr. Turner, go back to that slide a moment.
Sure. Yes.
Also, look at the percentage of not sure.
Yes.
And how high the percentage of the Black is. 24. There was 1/4. They weren't sure about it. And also on the Asian, how low that is.
Well, so this piece of the conversation starts to get into, how people feel about actually being racially classified and whether that gives them advantage or disadvantage. And one of the things that, was revealed behind this data, especially when we look at the disapprove in Black and the not sure with regard to Black, is that many of the respondents were younger, so they weren't us, that have actually seen the movement move over time and really, had grown up with parents who and timeframes that were very active and grounded in the civil rights movements. Younger people feel that they're far from that. They feel that, society is more race neutral until it starts to affect them. So, and again, what's also interesting about this slide, this was before the June 29th decision. This is a June 8th survey. Also, what I think is interesting, same survey, is in terms of how people viewed those people who actually got help from affirmative action. Conversations about whether or not the admissions process was less fair or more fair because of affirmative action. And you can see most people, most respondents, and you count up all those racial disapproves are in the purple now, considered that affirmative action actually made the process of admissions less fair. Those who were accepted under affirmative action were considered to be less qualified. Still, this is a June 8th, 2023 survey. The experience was also asked about. Does affirmative action heighten your experience, or would it heighten or benefit your experience in college? This one, I don't even know if this was really a great question, but people were very evenly divided and largely they didn't know. This last question, also very telling, is affirmative action is bad for ensuring equal opportunity for Americans of all racial and ethnic backgrounds. 31% bad, 36% good, but we have a whole lot of neither and not sure. So this is today's response. So the affirmative action decision in June 29th actually followed the climate of the country. However, what do we need to do? I think we need to do what we've been doing, and that is, our families, and certainly the thousands that I've talked to over 13 years, 14 years, have always understood that they can't worry about the noise in back of them. They have to focus on what they have to do at a micro level. And so we do a lot to make sure that our children understand what their value is. We make sure that, they understand that they are excellent and should be competing at high levels. But what also helps that is early career exposure. So for all of you students that are on this call, good for you, because this absolutely will make you smarter strategically in your journeys forward. Mentorship, you know, all of us as Black professionals, every single Black professional I know should be mentoring someone young. And then when we do get students involved in other curricular activities, it's important that we tie their activity to meaningful civic engagement, not just community service, not just something that checks the box off in a high school program, because a lot of selective universities will look at community service and discount it, unless this community service is actually, you know, towards something much more impactful and purposeful. And so I just kind of want to put that out there, because I see often community service rise and it just didn't help the student at all. The other thing is, I always want to point out is that given that we are in an environment that feeds student debt, our families need to be smart as early as possible, that somehow or another they're going to have to make decisions about how debt impacts the health and well-being of their families. So we have to save more. We have to understand that scholarships are not the answer for everything, because scholarships are actually attached to merit. They are not grants, and they are not grants just because of a diverse class of students. They're always attached to merit. The more merit you have, the more scholarships you can likely get at an institution, but they are merit-based. The difference between savings and scholarships will be loans. This is just the world that we live in. And the more we can save, obviously, the less we have to depend on loans. I don't know what's going to happen with regard to the conversations about student debt right now at the administrative level, federal administrative level, but it's just daunting to think that college financing hinges on this loan industry. And the last thing that I want to share, and the last few slides are really going to, you know, answer the question, hopefully, and especially for the younger people, about why does all this matter? Well, it matters because as Black people, we have significant gaps in wealth, which you hear about, but certainly within the wages that we earn and the careers that we choose. So what I want to say at this point is that as we think about what our strategies need to be in terms of moving forward, we have to prepare for rigor throughout the academic experience. You've got to be able to master the hard things, or as hard as you can get to. But mastery is important. You get to mastery by being able to practice a lot. For some people, that means test taking, but it also means, you know, taking some time to be very reflective about what it is you are learning, appreciating who is teaching you, and really getting under your subject matter. And then if you are going to go through a technical or the sciences, engineering, you've got to at least go up to calculus. It is a minimum. And the only way that you can get to calculus is by starting early. So at the junior high level, you need to be ready, you know, for algebra 2 as quick as possible, because that's how you're going to get to calculus. So just kind of want to also throw that out there. I wanted to just, as I said, take a last few looks at what these gaps mean for us as a community. McKinsey produced, I think, a really compelling report. They do every year. They take a different piece of looking at how they can slice up data about Black economics. Their last report was the state of Black America, what it is and what it could be. I'm not going to go through everything on this chart, except I do want to say one thing, a couple of things on this. With regard to economic disparities, what McKinsey found was that 20% of our 20 occupations account for 80% of our racial wage disparity. 43% of our racial demographic are in jobs that pay less than $30,000 annually. So higher education is the pathway to something better. Make no mistake about it. If there were parity in the world, in the country, if we were moving forward with policies that could put diversity at an advantage, we would see, based on projections that they've done, 30% higher incomes for Black Americans, 2 million more Black Americans in the middle class. Again, higher ed, those degrees are your way into the middle class typically. And they also project, this is great for the entrepreneurial students, on 615,000 more Black-owned businesses. So that's one way to look at it. Here's another way. This chart is a little bit dense. I'm not going to, but let me just kind of pick out what this is saying. What this chart is saying, even with professional careers, which all of these are here, we can look at health service managers, physicians, software developers, engineers. Even within these professions, we have significant representation or gaps in representation of not being there. Of all the physicians in the country, what we're saying here is that there is a gap, a 72% gap of Black physicians not being there, which is mind-boggling. Even if they are there, there is a 28% gap in terms of their earnings as compared to other white or other physicians. So even when we are there, we have income disparities, and we can go through, as this chart suggests, an analysis of what that means economically. And then, of course, how that translates into wealth. We have income disparities at both ends of the spectrum, which again is why education, this access to education, matters. On the bottom of the spectrum, which is interesting, 19% of Black families have negative net worth. That is approximated at 3.5 million Black families as compared to 6.7 white families. And you might say, ooh, at least we're not as many as them, but it's only 8% of them compared to 19% of us. On the higher part of the income scale, it's not like the news gets any better. There are 340,000 Black families estimated to have more than $1 million of net worth. That's 2% of Black families as compared to 16% of white families. And look at that number, 13 million. So again, why do these conversations about affirmative action matter? Why does higher education matter? It's because it has traditionally been our way into the middle class to start building wealth. So I say basically we have to focus on digging in. You know how in some of the leadership conversations, there's this big term now, well, just lean into this, it's a very strategic term. I say dig in. We absolutely need to be just unmoved by the fact that race neutrality benefits us as a community. We cannot have equality without equity. Equity and diversity initiatives which build equity are important tools. There is no, as you saw with the UCLA chart, there is no proxy for considering race in admissions. So how we do that will be interesting as we move forward, because the objective is not just to get, is to build numbers, but it is to build what we call critical mass so that we can build communities of learning and create environments where it's healthy for Black students to learn and to succeed. I say keep your eye on the prizes. Again, we have to look at institutions that not only are focused on getting more Black students in, but what is the environment that they're building? What is the outreach from that institution to you as a student and a family. You will see some very aggressive programs from some institutions because they want you there. In addition to that, you got to keep in mind that where you're going to go should be a family decision, because student loan debt can break a family. It can keep you from your own wealth building. And I think we need to be much smarter about that. And then a favorite quote of mine I'll leave you with is, you have to decide who you are and force the world to deal with you, not the idea of you. And I think that's what keeps me motivated in this work. My contact information, simple, mmturner@usc.edu. And I thank you. And I think we'll take questions from here. Try to go quick.
All right, thank you very much. That was fabulous. I believe when you guys heard the recording start and stop, I think that's when most of our students left, and Crystal is with them now. So I think the majority of them have moved on, but hopefully they'll get a chance to see that in the recording. And
right, they were a nice surprise.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to take some questions. I have one. And so hold on to your armrest. At what point in time, either now, should race be removed on the application? So if we're going to be neutrality, right? Should you take it off if it's supposed to not matter? And then people are admitted on a what's the word?
Well, so I love the question, and I will. So here are a few things. Race is going to be included on admissions applications, because even though it may not be considered for admission, there are still other ways that, institutionally we disaggregate data, and so race is going to be something that people are going to want to know as we look at the way certain cohorts behave, as we look at also how our admissions cohorts are distributed across majors and schools. That racial data, when we get down underneath the admissions conversation, when we get into the cohort conversation, it now again starts to become very important. It doesn't make sense to have a cohort of Black students be a majority of undecided majors. We need to, look at what these outcomes are at a very rigorous sense, and be a little bit smarter about, what objectives we're really trying to obtain. And so even though race may not happen in admissions, it's interestingly, Justice Roberts spoke about, well, but you can write about your experience. The thing is, we've been doing that for over 25 years, and that does still matter. So I don't tell students to just focus on putting your race in the essay. The essay has to really communicate what impact they want to have with admissions into this university. If race comes up, great, we will see it. If something else comes up because of their expertise and their passion, that is still going to get them in. So it's going to be a balance. But I think in today's world, honestly, they might want to have a sentence or two. I would do it, because this is the only place where we can connect race to experience, even though we're focusing on the impact of the experience. So that's the game we are playing right now. But race will still be a field in that record. We will be using it for other things.
Joseph, you have a question?
I do. And first, thank you, Dr. Turner, for all of your information that you provided. Having been out of the educational world for a while, I found a lot of it very informative.
Thank you.
My question is this: depending on how much you trust U.S. Census data, the Black population in the United States is somewhere around 13 to 14%. When you share data at admission rates for a number of the schools that you shared, many of those track about that same number, within 10 to 16% of incoming classes. Mm-hmm. My question is, what is a realistic number that we should expect? Should we expect to outsize our population? Should we be admitted at about the level of our population? Is it reasonable to expect that we might be at lower levels than our population?
Yeah, so, again, this is where this conversation gets really, really nuanced based on what is it that we want. And the reason but it's an important perspective because of how other people are using this same argument. You will note that Latino communities, for instance, in California, absolutely use their representation in California as the metric for state contracting, state admissions, all of this because they have a majority demographic now in the state. And so this does play to their advantage. We don't have that majority demographic advantage. And so nationally, our largest number in fact, Joseph, I've heard the number more in the 12% range, depending on how you actually classify Black, because the census data does strip out multiracial Black from their Black data now, so the 12% being our largest number, because if we look at state representation, we are at 6. If we look within cities, we are smaller. So it depends now on how we want to shift that argument. And that's why, I don't necessarily know how to feel yet about small numbers. I like to see us, if we're going to argue it at all, keep at a national level, because more selective universities anyway admit classes that are national, not just focusing on state admissions. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anyone yet has been out in front of that argument for the Black community yet. I've not seen it.
If I may follow up, I agree with everything that you just said. My question, and maybe I didn't phrase it as well as I would have liked, what should our goal be? Should we be trying to be 20% of incoming classes? Should we be trying to be 25%? Should 15% be a realistic attainment? Where should we be?
Well, I look at it a little differently. I do look at it in terms of how we're positioning our young people for success in the future. If we're going to be 12% of highly admissible engineering students or data science students, or these kinds of students that can be at the top end of income bracket careers, that to me is much more impactful and something that if we understand that, careers that start at 175K are very helpful versus careers in industries where you're living check to check, unless of course you have those absolutely passionate students that don't care and they can live out of a suitcase or whatever. But we know in today's world and in terms of moving our own family legacies forward, we need to be a little smarter about how we help them, think about opportunity and economically what that means. We still have a lot of students that are in careers that show up in very low paying outcomes. And that's just facts. So I would like to see us understand, that mix of whatever that number is going to be, and really get down to levels where we are really impacting this differently.
Robin?
My question, again, this presentation was exceptional. I think that the recording of it will allow the youth to be able to go back and do slide by slide and be able to take this in. So thank you for the statistics, which validate your experience and our experience. Praise God for affirmative action. That's how I got to the University of Missouri in 1973 and graduated in 1977 with only borrowing $1,500. And so and again, I had to work. I worked the whole 40-hour work. But I wanted to ask you about, and so again, I think part of this is us sharing the story, telling the story and sharing the story and having this continued conversation, because that's how we grew up. And somewhere along the line, because of cell phones and everything else, we're not having these conversations regularly, consistently. But my question is in relating to, I tell young people that why not get an associate's degree while you're in high school, which forces them to be a little bit more academic attuned and focused. And then it cuts down on the costs, and you're a transfer student. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I can so speak to that. I am, when I was speaking about prepare for rigor, this is absolutely where I would encourage our community to use the community college system early. When your kids are even, I forget what the age range is at a minimum that they can accept, but whatever that is, I know in high school, they can go to these classes. They are not charged. It is important, however, that if they're going to take community college classes, they take them at the community college and not at their high school, because that is the only way that they will get unit credit that is transferable to a college. And, the fact of the matter is that they can get early exposure, especially into math, subjects like economics, some of these more technical subjects that maybe the teacher in the classroom in their high school, because they're tracking differently in high school, is not going to give them the attention for, but they can get it in the community college session with, I think, a whole lot more safety and and also the funny thing about it is you put a young kid in college and they think they're doing something. Yeah. So now their self-esteem goes up because, they can tell their friends, I'm in college. I started college at 15.
Yeah.
And so it has its own little momentum with it, but we should be using that system more. And frankly, our international students use that system all the time. They come in, they may land here, they may even buy property here, but Santa Monica College does very well with an international student pathway for transfer. When I speak to Black families about transfer, they're like, oh my God, I failed. I'm like, no, I think you're being smart, because especially if you're looking at institutions that have a wide transfer pathway, your kid is smart. They will be able to be successful in that pathway. So,
well, and the other thing is too, it provides them with the tools that they need from a writing and a reading perspective that college requires, right? You're not gonna, test out of something or not study and then show up for a test and get a decent grade. I'm not saying you have to be an honor student, but to me, that's an opportunity for them to up their skill set to be prepared for that.
Yes, and some colleges, some institutions will take transfer after a freshman year, and some will take it after 2 years. You have to do your last 64 units in residency at the college that you will graduate from. So for some of our kids, it allows them a do-over, especially our boys who mature a little later sometimes. It allows them a different option to get real serious.
Crystal, we're right at 12. You want to go over a little bit?
I gotta jump out of here because I gotta make sure these kids get on their transportation because they're all gone now. They're getting their lunch on their way out the door. But okay. Awesome. I didn't get to see all of it because my internet went crazy, but I will go back and see the recording. And it was streaming live on Facebook for those of you want to go back and revisit it. Thank you, Michelle. The kids, this was their first introduction to a podcast. So you were a perfect person for them to see.
Oh, well, I love you guys and thank you so much. And I guess we'll all kind of stay tuned to see what happens politically. But thank you for asking me here today. I really appreciate it.
Right. Yeah, and I have to go. We did I have another show, the Business Zone. We did one yet last week on how does this affect small businesses. You know, I do understand from right now that there's a bigger happening. We Roe versus Wade is there's so much more to this than what we think it is, and so there could be some, you know, we feel some ratifications to if you start eliminating and changing laws that affect minorities, then you know if it's a bigger agenda, then that means we can eliminate minority certifications, which would prevent us from getting into that space. Is so much bigger than just the university.
Absolutely.
We think it's just about school. It's about everything that we need in order to function in this world, the whole entire, especially so we can say, oh yeah, but it doesn't really matter because I'm not in school. I don't have kids in school. What does that matter? But it does matter if you're a small business owner and you need to get into a bigger playing field, and they start eradicating laws. In Florida, they're eradicating all kinds of laws that could affect us as Black people. They literally could rewrite the amendments 13, 14, and 15, which would really have a big effect on us. That's from my opinion.
Well, so far, our federal legislation is protecting minority businesses and moving closer to setting goals, especially in the hospital industry. That legislation is being pushed forward very aggressively. So that shoe has not fallen yet. And interestingly enough, a lot of that legislation is being pushed forward by the Latino community because this is their door open now. You know, they have the demographics, you know, to argue for it. And they are passing some legislation which does benefit the minority business enterprise. But we will see how this falls. You know, it's a fight for all of us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Greg, you want to take it out, and I'm going to pop off. And thank you, Michelle, and thank you all
Krista, we have a couple of hands raised. You want to go over a little bit time-wise?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So we have Lamont and then Amber.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I happen to have found out that students that are high achievers, especially those in foreign languages, and I do personally encourage them to acquire foreign languages, especially Spanish, the official second language of the United States of America. What do you think about that sort of thing? Looking for, you clearly said earlier that it is advantageous for students to study hard and become a high achiever, but can't they take credits at those junior colleges and that sort of thing for placement?
Okay, so the placement, so yes and no. Every institution will have their own rules about how many credits they will accept. So again, the community college really should be used to strengthen a student's mastery in a subject. Placement is very tricky. And if you, I think maybe an early strategy to better understanding that is to pull up some colleges that you think your student might be interested in, or your son, daughter, family member might be interested in early, and go look at what they will accept. It ranges institution to institution. You know, the same argument with regard to advanced placement exams varies from institution to institution. Some institutions don't accept credit unless you've got a full 5 on that exam. So, and then the type of subjects. So it's not a guarantee, but it is a great pathway in terms of strengthening rigor in a resume. The language piece, absolutely. I mean, you know, our kids need to start to, you know, understand they are global citizens, and it makes them more valuable as an employee, as an entrepreneur. So that second language is always going to be advantageous to them.
Thank you so much.
Amber, you have something you can share with us?
Sure. Thank you for calling on me. Thank you for the presentation. It's been great. My name is Amber Mishak. I'm actually the Director of Business Jobs and Social Responsibility at Los Angeles World Airports. And so I just wanted to, actually the comment I made was previously said. I wanted to reiterate it. I do think that for people in my position in our industry, we are anticipating that these same attacks are going to move forward on contracting and employment as well. So I think it needs to be a multi-pronged approach. I think that the same forces, you know, from Ward, Connerly, Bloom, and so forth, that are they're very well organized and funded, and I think it's really about you know, keeping people of color, especially out of elite ranks of society, decision-making and ability, you know, so I think there is a huge political ideological movement against this. And so I think we do have to prepare small businesses, particularly that a lot of the federal and local minority, women, and disadvantaged business enterprise programs are going to be curtailed or ended. And it will take time. I think that we see the writing on the wall. I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but I think it's something where we really need to pivot to a whole new paradigm shift for small businesses and businesses owned by people of color. So that's my comment.
Yeah, which is why I think the data from McKinsey is very interesting in terms of what the projected impacts with regard to parity look like. Our conversations haven't been data driven. They haven't been driven by what is, you know, affirmative action is a conversation is about what is unfair to others, but really qualifying what is fair given parity is a different conversation. And we need to start looking at what that really means economically, as well as generationally. And we're starting to get more data about our behavior with top research firms. And now we need to start looking at how we use that in our arguments.
You know, that was my point about your deck, Michelle. You know, those stats, those are facts. They're facts. And those are the kinds of facts that we need to make sure that these young people understand. You know, again, my big thing is reading and writing. If you can read, you can get ahead. If you can learn how to write, you can learn how to narrate what you're reading. And I think, and so again, thank you again. Beautiful presentation and excellent comments from the audience.
Thank you.
Stephen Turner, who do we have next week? You still there, Stephen? All right, I got to look it up. Robin, go ahead and get ready to close this out a little bit. Let me look up and see who we have next week. I forgot.
Joseph, you know, this live streamed on. I don't know about getting a copy of the deck, but it's definitely live streamed. You can pick it up on, you know, the Facebook or YouTube and the Facebook pages. But again, you guys, these are these critical conversations. When I look at some of the names that are here, majority of you guys grew up in a time period where there was. If it wasn't at the table, it was after church, it was on our car ride, you know, going down south to visit the family. These conversations were being held in our community. And I think we have to get back to what Black folks normally do. We talk about everything else, you know, when I talk to young people, I tell them, you're so astute when it comes to your cell phone, the network, I mean, on all of this. Tic-tac, holly, pallywhack, big, give a dog a bone. You're so astute with all of that. Take those same skills and transfer them to your future. Transfer them to your everyday life, and you will definitely win. No question. We have the ability. I truly believe that we are the surviving race. The Lord left us here because we're moralistic, we're empathetic, we know how to nurture, but somewhere along the line, we forgot to do that for ourselves. And so again, that's why we have this community briefing. You know, we need you guys to help us to continue to grow this. Greg, just finally, I'm going to introduce you to Addison Peterson from Cameo, who talks about dual enrollment, which aligns with what Michelle just presented to us. And so, and I didn't know Addison was, I have no girl named Addison, so sorry, Addison. But we will be doing an e-introduction to him. I think Amber Michèle, what she's doing is someone we should be bringing on too. Because again, if we can get to everybody's point, we can get ahead of this, and we can at least put the information out there. Now, what they do with it is on them. And so that really is the mission.
I have to go, but
Yeah.
call me if you need me, guys.
We
all do. Dr. Turner, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate everything that you provided us. This information will be recorded. So thank you so much. Stephen, thank you for inviting Dr. Turner. We're glad all of you here. Next week, we have Laura Okanubi, and she's the Executive Director of IDEO Program Services. So join us this coming Thursday and every Thursday for the community briefing. Thank you so much. And we're out.
Very, very good. Have a wonderful week, everybody. Hi, Emma.
Everybody have a good week.
All right, now we're off the
you too.
We're off the recording.
Right,
yeah, great.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Rob. So
bye, everyone.
Robin, love you, girl.
I believe, as a futurist, I believe that 50 years or 100 years from now, we'll arrive when race is no longer a factor. It's no longer asked on the census because it doesn't matter any longer. That's if we really want to get to that point, that's where that's where we'd end up.
Great point, it's a construct. To her point, which is what I'm where Michelle was. We need these stats. We need these.
I get that.
We can talk from an empathetic position, but we have to have the stats.
Yeah. We did it now.
Yeah.
But if we really want racial equality, right, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Right?
This is America, really?
Yes, really. Yes, really. Otherwise, this nation will fall. It'll crumble and
it's on its way. That's what I'm saying.
It's on its way, and it'll implode. So that's where we have to migrate towards. Otherwise, that division will always be there.
I don't have an argument with that. It's just that when you think about who built this country, besides the Native Americans and the Hispanics, Mexicans who've already been here, then these three groups. These three groups, when we get some parity for those three groups, then yeah, you're right. We don't have to have it.
Yeah.
But everybody got to see. We're back to again. Everybody needs to participate in the census.
But it took 500 years to create this. It's not going to go away anytime soon. But that needs to be the target somewhere down the road.
Yeah, but to your point though, in the last 24 months. Look how much destruction has happened in the last 24 months for what took us 40, 50, 100, 500 years to get to. So, we're back to again, voting is king.
Voting is key, and we're digressing. We're going back to apartheid. They're taking what they did during apartheid. It's gradually been implemented in this country. You got to watch the signs. It is awful what's happening.
Yeah, but too many folks are apathetic about it, where we have, on average, mid-20s voter turnout. And that's registered. I think when we get a high of somewhere around 34, 35%, that still means 65% of registered voters, particularly in our community, are not voting. They're not aware of the issues. And they're too busy fattening the pockets of Bernard Arnault. You know who he is, right?
Emma
buying your LV bags.
Emma is a prime example of what you do, to help preclude some of these challenges that we have. She had that voter registration thing at her house. At my house. People showed up and people, got registered and they voted. And I think that one of the pillars of community briefing is to ensure that we, everybody who dials in here, can you vote and have 10 people, bring 10 people with you, make sure you're registered to vote. And, we continue to cover the policies and the processes here because some people learn by listening versus reading. And if they listen, then maybe they will go and read. Hey, Stephen.
I know you're ready to go. Thank you guys for everything.
Thank you, Emma. Good to see you.
And then the other introduction I'm going to do is Mary Chitty and her team. These guys are doing this program that's very, very helpful for folks who have not taken advantage of the funding that's still there after the COVID to help business owners. And so I had an opportunity to meet up with her about a week ago, and I was like, you know what, this again, here we go again with some solid information that someone can use immediately to take advantage of that.
Thank you, Robin, for that intro.
Sure, we'll do
That's
that
great. And Renee Tabor is on with me, my partner. And yes, employee retention credit is crucial in helping businesses, small businesses, minority businesses, to take advantage of what, according to Forbes, is something that the larger community has been taking advantage of since the pandemic. And part of it will be ending in 2024, the other part in 2025, but we can still work with you, qualify your business, and see what we can get for you.
So I'll do those introductions when we get off the
Okay. Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Good to see you guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.